York City, people pass by millions of strangers every day. Nobody expects to see the same face twice. As for me, I saw the exact same woman for 17 straight days. The first time I assumed it was a coincidence. The second time it caught my attention. The third time I took a picture. She was in a different place every time. Sometimes on a subway platform, sometimes on a crowded sidewalk, sometimes right in front of my workplace. But she always wore the same black coat. Her head was always down, and the more I tried to get closer to her, the further away she moved. On the 17th day, I decided to follow her. That decision was the biggest mistake of my life because I wasn't the one following her. She was waiting for me. My name was Ethan. This happened in the fall of 2022 in Manhattan. I worked as an analyst at a financial firm. Every workday, I took the exact same route. In the mornings, I would exit at the Lexington Avenue subway station, and in the evenings, I usually returned home from near Grand Central Terminal. My life was so structured that you could practically set your watch by my commute. The first time I saw that woman was on a Monday morning. She was standing at the very end of the subway platform. A long black coat, black gloves, a black umbrella. Her head was tilted down. Until the train arrived, she didn't move even once. As soon as the train pulled into the platform, people rushed forward. I boarded the car as well. When the doors were closing, I took one last look at the platform. The woman was still standing in her spot, but as the train entered the tunnel, I caught a glimpse of her face through the window for a split second. She was looking directly at me. The next day, I saw her somewhere else. This time, right in front of my office building. She had no phone in her hand. She wasn't talking to anyone. She was simply looking at my building from across the street. I wanted to approach her. The traffic light turned green. I crossed the street, but when I reached the other side, the woman was gone. The surrounding area was completely open. There was practically nowhere to hide, yet it was as if she had dissolved into thin air. Over the next 2 weeks, this repeated itself. In the subway, in a cafe, in a bookstore, in a park, even once at 11 o'clock at night in front of the building where I lived. Every time the same clothes, every time the same posture, and every time, as soon as I approached her, she vanished. On the 17th day, I secretly took a photo of her with my phone. When I got home, I zoomed in on the photo. And in that moment, for the first time, I felt genuine fear because there was no woman in the photo. Instead, where she should have been standing, there was only a single shadow turned toward me. I examined the photo for hours. I turned up the brightness. I adjusted the contrast. I enlarged the shadow, but the result didn't change. No person was visible. There was just a strange, dark silhouette shaped like a human in the middle of the sidewalk. And strangest of all, the shadows of all the other people around fell in a different direction. Only that specific shadow extended straight toward me. The next day, I decided to completely change my routine. I took a different subway line to work. I spent my lunch break in another neighborhood, and in the evening, I took a taxi back home. I didn't see the woman anywhere. I thought it was finally over. At 1:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. An MMS arrived from an unknown number. When I opened the photo, my breath hitched. This was my bedroom. The photo had been taken from outside the window. I was sleeping in my bed, and the timestamp on the photo was from just 2 minutes prior. I immediately ran toward the window. I pulled back the curtain. The street was empty. Below, only one person was visible, a woman wearing a long black coat. She was standing on the other side of the street. Her head was tilted down. As soon as I looked at her, a second photo arrived on my phone. This time the photo showed the exact moment I pulled back the curtain. The photo was taken from inside my apartment. The phone almost fell from my hand. The second photo showed the moment I pulled back the curtain. This time the camera had taken it from inside the room. I was standing in front of the window. Behind me, the dark corner of the bedroom was visible. I zoomed in on the image. At first, nothing was clear. Then, Beside the closet, a black figure's silhouette began to emerge. I turned around at lightning speed. The room was empty. The closet door was closed. I turned on the bathroom light. I looked under the bed. I searched the entire apartment. No one was there. The door was locked from the inside. The windows were closed. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message had arrived. Turn was too fast. Chest tight. This time I called the police. A patrol arrived in about 10 minutes. They inspected the entire apartment. No signs of forced entry were found. I showed them the photos. The officers exchanged looks. One of them asked, "Have you seen this woman before?" "Yes, for 17 days. The officer forwarded the photo to his phone and searched the system. A few minutes later, he showed me the screen. An old photograph of a woman closely resembling the one in the black coat had opened. Underneath it, it read, "Missing person, Manhattan, 1998. The woman's name was Evelyn Moore. She was 32 years old when she went missing, last seen right on the street where I lived." The officer opened the file and handed it to me. Date of disappearance, October 14, 1998. According to witness statements, Evelyn had left work in the evening and headed toward the subway, but she had never reached her home. Neither her body had been found, nor was it known what had happened to her. I looked at the photo again. It was identical to the woman I had seen over the last 17 days, unchanged, the same face, the same black coat, the same gaze. The detective said in a quiet voice, "If this is a joke, it's a very sick joke." Really saw her. Has anyone else seen her? I thought about it. I don't know. The next day, as I went to work, I decided to test this. In the morning, the woman was standing at the end of the subway platform again. This time, I approached the people around me and started asking, "Excuse me, do you see the woman standing over there?" The first man looked down the platform. "There's nobody there." The second woman gave the exact same answer. The third person looked at my face strangely. "Buddy, are you all right?" I looked back at the end of the platform. The woman was still there, but now her head wasn't down. For the first time, she was looking directly at me. Then very slowly, she raised her right hand. She was calling me over to her. There were still 2 minutes left until the train arrived. I cautiously stepped toward her. When the distance between us was down to about 10 meters, my phone buzzed. A message came from an unknown number. "Do not go near her." I froze in my tracks right at that moment. People started screaming from the other end of the platform, right behind where the woman was standing. A man in a suit had fallen onto the tracks. The train was coming out of the tunnel at high speed, but my gaze wasn't on the man on the tracks. It was fixed on the woman because she was no longer there. Panic instantly broke out at the subway station. People were backing away from the platform. The train hit the emergency brakes. Meanwhile, I was still staring at the spot where the woman had been standing just a second ago. It was empty, completely empty. My phone buzzed again. New message. "She is trying to save you." I read the message and froze in shock. Who trying to save me from what? A few minutes later, the police closed down the station. The man who fell onto the tracks survived. However, a sentence he said while giving his statement baffled everyone. "A woman pushed me." Detective asked, "Which woman?" "She was wearing a black coat." Security cameras at the platform were checked. In the video, the man suddenly fell onto the tracks, but there was no one seen pushing him. That same evening, I was returning home from work. My phone received another message. This time, only coordinates were sent. When I opened them on the map, the address pointed to an old, long-abandoned building just 2 blocks away from where I lived. Curiosity won over my fear. I went to the address. The building was abandoned. I went down the dust-covered stairs into the basement. By the side of the wall stood an old metal door. I pushed the door open. Inside, only a table and a rusted metal cabinet were visible. On top of the table lay an old handbag. Inside were an ID card, a subway card, and a faded family photo. The name on the ID card, Evelyn Moore. As soon as I took the bag in my hand, my phone buzzed one last time. This time there was no text, only a photo arrived. In the photo, I was standing in the basement. The photo had been taken from the doorway, yet when I entered the room, I hadn't heard the door open behind me. After seeing the photo, I immediately turned toward the doorway. The hallway was empty. There was no sound of footsteps. However, the metal door slowly began to close on its own. I rushed forward, stopped it, and slipped outside. At that exact moment, a final message arrived on my phone. Call the police. This time, I didn't hesitate. The police thoroughly searched the basement. Behind the rusted cabinet, they discovered strange cracks in the concrete floor. After a few hours of work, the floor was broken open. Underneath, human bones were found. Beside them, an old black coat. The forensics results came back a few weeks later. The DNA of the remains matched Evelyn Moore, who had gone missing in 1998. The case was officially closed after 28 years. The police believed that Evelyn had been murdered in that basement and hidden away. As for me, I still couldn't find an answer to one question: who led me there? A month later, my life began returning to normal. I no longer saw her anywhere, not in the subway, not on the street, nor in front of my building. Then one evening, while waiting for a train at Grand Central Terminal, I saw the familiar black coat at the end of the platform. This time, I wasn't afraid. Slowly, I walked toward her. With only 5 meters remaining between us, the woman smiled for the first time. Then very slowly, she turned her head behind me. Instinctively, I looked back. Standing in the crowd was a man. He was wearing a long black coat. In his hand, he held an old camera. He had aimed the lens directly at me. His flash went off. I blinked. When I looked again, both the woman and the man with the camera were gone. The next day, I found an anonymous envelope in my mailbox. Inside was only a single photograph. In the photo, I was standing on the subway platform. Behind me, Evelyn Moore wasn't looking at me, but at the man with the camera. Written on the back of the photo was just one sentence: I was never following you. I was following the one following you. Most people say the same thing about Las Vegas. This city never sleeps. As for me, I saw the city literally hold its breath at times. I was a night taxi driver on a Friday at 3:17 a.m. I picked up my last passenger. He was a quiet man in his 50s wearing a gray suit. He sat in the back seat and without giving an address said just one sentence: take me to my final stop. I thought it was a joke. I looked at him through the rearview mirror. He was just looking out the window. Address? There was a few seconds of silence. Then he said in a calm voice, you're already going there. My name was Ryan. This happened in the summer of 2021 in Las Vegas, Nevada. I drove a taxi on the night shift. Friday and Saturday nights were the most lucrative times for the city. Casinos, hotels, and bars were packed with people until morning. But after 3 in the morning, the streets became strangely quiet. It was 3:17 a.m. I accepted a ride near the Strip. The passenger quietly sat in the back seat, gray suit, black tie, an old leather bag in his hand. He wasn't drunk, nor was he in a hurry. He was simply looking out the window. What address? I asked again. He replied in a low voice, you're already going there. I looked at the app on my phone. The destination field was blank. This wasn't normal. The customer had a booking, but our destination wasn't shown. I wanted to pull over and cancel the trip. An error popped up on the screen. Trip cannot be canceled. I had never seen this message before. I had no choice but to keep driving. About 10 minutes later, the city lights were left behind. The road was leading me into the desert. I looked back in the mirror. The man sat as calmly as before. Then he suddenly asked, have you driven down this road before? No. That's good. Looked at my face for the first time and said, because very few ever return. I tried to take what he said as a joke, but for some reason I couldn't laugh. The GPS was still working. However, there were no street names on the map. There was only a thin gray line visible, and the surroundings were pitch black. Only occasional old power poles could be seen. About 20 minutes later, my phone lost signal, the radio went silent, the GPS froze, yet the car's navigation kept running on its own. Only one sentence appeared on the dashboard screen. 2 miles remaining. I looked back. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he placed the old leather bag in his hands onto his knees. "Open it." "What?" "The bag. That's your property. It's yours too." Despite an uneasy feeling inside me, I pulled over. I opened the bag. There were only 3 things inside: an old pocket watch, a folded map, and a yellowed newspaper. When I read the newspaper headline, my heart sank. Vegas taxi driver missing after late night fare. The date was 1996. The article contained a photo of the missing driver. When I saw the picture, my breath hitched because the man in the photo was the passenger sitting in my back seat. Part 2, hands trembling, I reread the newspaper. The headline wasn't wrong, and neither was the photo. The article stated that after picking up his last passenger at 3:17 a.m., the driver had vanished. His vehicle was found 3 days later in the desert, but there was no one inside. Neither the driver nor the passenger. I slowly looked in the mirror. The back seat was empty. I immediately stopped the car. I opened the doors and stepped outside. The surroundings were completely silent. Not even the wind was blowing. I opened the rear door. No one was there, yet the leather bag was still sitting on the seat. Just as I went to pick it up and close it, my phone buzzed. There was no signal. Still, a new message had arrived. "Look behind you." As soon as I read the message, I felt warm breath on the back of my neck, as if someone were standing right next to my ear. I didn't turn around. I slowly walked toward the driver's side door. Just as I was about to sit down, a very quiet voice came from the back seat. "Make the same mistake." This was that man's voice. I looked in the mirror. This time he was there again, except unlike before, his face was completely covered in mud and blood. Fixing his eyes on me, he said just one sentence: "This road chooses us." Screaming, I bolted out of the car. I was standing alone in the middle of the pitch-black desert. The car's engine was still running. The headlights illuminated the road ahead, yet the road looked different than it had just seconds ago. The straight asphalt on the map was now splitting into 2 directions. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks from fear. I sat back in the driver's seat. I checked the back seat. The man was gone. The leather bag had vanished too, as if it had never existed. The navigation screen suddenly lit up again. This time there was no map. Only a name appeared on the black background: Red Rock Canyon Road. And below it a time: 03:17. I looked at my watch. It showed 03:48. I checked my phone: 03:48. Yet all the car's displays stubbornly read 03:17. Suddenly, a taxi appeared in the distance in the middle of the road ahead. It was an old yellow one. Its headlights were on. It was speeding toward me. I pulled over to the side of the road. As the taxi passed by me, I saw the driver. There was sheer terror on his face. He rolled down his window and shouted toward me, "Turn back." At that exact moment, the same man in the gray suit in his back seat slowly turned his head toward me. The 2 taxis passed each other. I looked back through the mirror. There was nothing. No taxi, no lights, as if the sight I had seen seconds ago had never happened. My phone buzzed one last time. This time there was no message, just a photo of an old newspaper clipping arrived. The headline read: "Another taxi driver missing on Red Rock Canyon Road." Date was tomorrow's date. Looking at the newspaper photo, my heart beat even faster. The date belonged to a day that hadn't arrived yet, and the car in the photo was my taxi. Even the license plate was the same. The headline read: "Night driver vanishes without a trace." I immediately wanted to start the engine and turn back. I turned the steering wheel, yet the road was no longer behind me. In the glow of the headlights, only long, straight asphalt was visible. It was as if the direction I had come from had been erased. The GPS on my phone suddenly started working again. Only a single point was visible on the map. It had no name, just destination, and below it the distance, 4 miles. I didn't press the accelerator, yet the car began moving on its own. I slammed on the brakes. It had no effect. I turned the wheel. It didn't respond. The taxi was moving straight ahead. A few seconds later, an old, abandoned gas station appeared ahead. Its lights were off. Its sign was covered in rust. The car stopped there. The engine shut off on its own. Complete silence fell. Then the speaker of the old radio crackled, followed by a man's voice, very quiet, very close. "Now it's your turn." At the same moment, the rear door slowly opened. No one was visible, yet the back seat seemed to be waiting for a new passenger. I reached back to close the door. The door closed by itself at that very instant. The car interior plunged back into complete silence. A few seconds later, the taxi meter turned on $0, then it started increasing on its own, $3, $50, $7, $80, $12, $40, even though the car wasn't moving. Suddenly, the sound of a seatbelt buckling came from the back seat. Click. I didn't dare to look in the mirror, but eventually I did. The back seat appeared empty, except the seatbelt was now buckled. My phone buzzed one last time. This time there was no message, only an audio recording arrived. For a long time, only static could be heard. Then the familiar man's voice began to speak. "If you're listening to this, it means I didn't make it." This was the voice of the taxi driver who had gone missing in 1996. He continued, "Don't look in the back seat. Speak to the passenger. Most importantly, never accept a fare that comes in at 03:17 am. The audio recording cut off abruptly. A few weeks later, the police took my statement. They confirmed that there really was an old gas station in that desert. Yet when I went to the location I had pointed out, there was nothing there, no building, no asphalt, nor any of my tire tracks. I quit driving a taxi for good. 2 years later, I was living in another state. One night I was watching the local news on TV. The anchor said, "In Las Vegas, another night taxi driver has mysteriously disappeared. It is reported that he picked up his last passenger at 03:17 a.m. A security camera footage was shown on screen. The new driver was greeting the passenger entering the car, gray suit, black tie, an old leather bag. I held my breath because the person sitting in the back seat of the car was me, except about 30 years older. He looked toward the camera very slowly. He shook his head. Then his lips moved. There was no sound, yet I could read what he said. "Accept the ride." During forest fires in California, most people give the exact same advice. Leave as soon as the evacuation order arrives. And that's what I did. I got into my car and left home in the middle of the night. The road was completely empty. The fire was left miles behind. After driving for about 20 minutes, a government alert arrived on my phone. "Emergency ALERTI." Opened the message. There was only a single sentence written, "Turn back." I thought it was a system error, because all the radios and police cars were directing people in the opposite direction. A minute later, a second alert arrived. This time the message was even shorter. "Fire is ahead of you." I immediately looked at the road ahead. No flames were visible. There was no smoke either, but far in the distance, someone was standing in the middle of the road. He was wearing firefighter gear, and with both hands he was signaling me not to stop. My name was Logan. This happened in August 2023 in Northern California. I lived in a small town located in a mountainous area at the edge of the forest. During the summer months, forest fires were nothing new to us. When we heard the evacuation sirens, everyone did the same thing, grabbed their essentials and left town. That night it was 1:26 and the sky was painted orange. The glow of the flames was visible behind. The radio continuously repeated the same news. Highway 36. Travel in an easterly direction. I was traveling along that exact road. The road was almost empty. Only a few cars were visible in the distance. Then the first emergency alert arrived on my phone. Turn back. A minute later, the second alert. Fire is ahead of you. I didn't understand anything. The way ahead was pitch black. There were no flames. Right at that moment, someone appeared in the glow of my headlights. He was in firefighter gear. His face was covered with a smoke mask. He was standing in the middle of the road. Frantically waving his hands, he was signaling me not to proceed. Instinctively, I slammed on the brakes. The car stopped in front of him. I rolled down the window and shouted, "Is the road closed?" He didn't answer. He simply raised his hand very slowly and pointed to the mirror behind me. I automatically looked at the rearview mirror inside the cabin. The back seat was empty. When I looked forward again, the firefighter was no longer in the middle of the road. I immediately got out of the car. I looked down both sides of the road. The surroundings smelled only of ash and smoke. There was nowhere for the firefighter to hide. The road stretched straight for miles, and he had vanished in a matter of seconds. When I returned to the car, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't an alert, but a message from an unknown number. Look at the mirror again. My heart sank. Slowly, I looked at the cabin rearview mirror. The back seat was still empty. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I caught a very faint reflection in the right corner of the mirror, as if someone was crouching on the floor of the back seat. I turned around at lightning speed. There was no one there. A second message arrived on my phone. You can't see it when you look directly. No longer wanted to get out of the car. I stepped on the gas and continued down the road. About 5 minutes later, the radio crackled on its own. Then an unknown man's voice was heard. This voice didn't sound like an official dispatcher. He spoke very calmly. Leave Highway 36 immediately. Following that, the radio returned to its regular broadcast. A few seconds later, the official news started. The announcer was saying, "All drivers, please continue along Highway 36 for safety." Completely contradictory instructions. I didn't know which one to believe. Right at that moment, the road split into two directions. On the left, an official sign, Highway 36, and on the right side stood an old, rusted sign. Hasty white paint was written across it, "Turn back while you can." I stopped the car at the fork in the road. An official sign on one side, an old, rusted board on the other side. Logic was telling me to continue along Highway 36, but what had happened over the last 10 minutes was already far from logic. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't an emergency alert. Only one word was written in the sender field, "Cal Fire." The message was brief, "Turn right." Without hesitation, I turned the wheel to the right. I entered the old road. The asphalt was cracked. Trees almost completely covered the path. A few minutes later, my phone's signal vanished entirely. The sound of the highway left behind had also disappeared. Suddenly, I saw a burned fire truck by the side of the road in the distance. Its door was open. I approached cautiously. No one was inside. However, an active service radio was lying on the driver's seat. A faint crackle was coming from the speaker. Then a man began to speak. "If you are hearing this, do not go onto Highway 36. Then another voice cut in, a scream, then the sound of very strong wind, and the final sentence, "They appear inside the smoke." The broadcast abruptly cut off. At that exact moment, my car's headlights illuminated the gap between the trees ahead. There, about 10 firefighters were standing. They were all looking at me. None of them moved, none of them spoke. I blinked and looked again. They had all vanished. Only one person remained, that same masked firefighter I had seen first. This time with his hand, he wasn't pointing forward. He was pointing behind me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I slowly looked at the cabin rearview mirror. This time the back seat wasn't empty behind the rear windshield. Human silhouettes were standing inside the smoke. 1, then 2, then 5. Within a few seconds, their numbers began to increase. None of them were moving. They were simply staring at me in the dim light of the headlights. I quickly turned around, looking through the rear windshield. There was nothing. I looked back at the mirror again. The silhouettes were visible once more. My phone buzzed. A new message. Look at what appears in the mirror. I threw my phone to the floor and started the engine. The car struggled to move. A few hundred meters later, I saw an old police car in the middle of the road. Its door was open. Its lights were still flashing. I wanted to pull up and call for help, but there was no one in the car. On the driver's seat lay only an active service tablet. The last entry was visible on the screen. Incident report location, Highway 36 status, road closed reason. The last line was left incomplete. They are not the smoke. Suddenly, the tablet screen went dark. Then the camera opened on its own. I was visible on the screen. The tablet was recording me at that exact moment. However, the angle of the camera wasn't from the police car. The image was being taken from the back seat of my car. I dropped the tablet from my hands onto the ground. The screen didn't shatter. The image simply changed. It was no longer displaying a camera feed, but a live video. My car was visible in the video. The headlights were on, the driver's door was open, and I was standing next to the police car. The video was in absolute real time. Yet one detail froze me in place in the video. Someone was sitting in the back seat of my car. His head was down, his face wasn't visible. I immediately ran toward my car. I opened the door. The back seat was empty. My phone buzzed. A new message. He hasn't gotten out yet. At that very moment, the smell of burning intensified inside the cabin, yet there were no flames nearby. Then a very low voice was heard from the back seat, as if someone was whispering, "Keep going." I froze in shock. The voice came again, this time clearer. "If you stop, they will reach you." Voice sounded like the masked firefighters. I started the engine and slammed the gas pedal to the floor. A few minutes later, the smoke abruptly thinned out. Ahead, the main highway finally appeared. Dozens of police cars and fire engines were parked at the entrance of the road. I breathed a sigh of relief. I got out of the car and ran toward a firefighter nearby. After listening to me, he asked in confusion, "Did you say a masked firefighter?" "Yes, directed you to this road." "That's right." Firefighter's expression changed. He pulled an old photo from his pocket. In the photo was a group of 6 firefighters. Standing at the edge of the photograph was the same masked man. The firefighter said in a low voice, "This crew perished in this fire in 2019. I looked at the photo again. For the first time, I could clearly see the masked man's face. It was the same man who had signaled me not to stop in the middle of the road a few hours ago. The firefighter took the photo back from my hand and said, "None of them survived. Official report states that the team misjudged the direction of the flames. Yet I saw them tonight." He didn't answer. He simply took me into the command tent. A large map was laid out there. The map showed the fire's direction of movement that night. I immediately noticed one detail. The old road the masked firefighter had sent me down had actually been the safest route. If I had continued along official Highway 36, a few minutes later, flames and thick smoke would have completely blocked the road. The firefighters later confirmed that dozens of cars had been trapped in that section. Yet one question gave me no peace. Who had warned me about this? A week later, I went to the local department to read the official report regarding the incident. They opened the 2019 file in the archives. Among the group photos was one final photograph, taken a few minutes before the fire started. 6 firefighters were looking at the camera, and in the background, standing by the side of the road, was me, in the exact same clothes, next to the exact same car. Even though I had gone to that region for the very first time in 2023, I pointed to the picture and asked, "How is this possible?" The archive worker looked at the photo for a long time. Then he said quietly, "This man looks a lot like you." I couldn't answer. Returning home that evening, there was an envelope with no sender in my mailbox. Inside was only a burned firefighter badge and a short note. "We managed to get you out this time." Even as years pass, I still don't drive on forest roads at night. But whenever I see the silhouette of a single firefighter standing alone in the smoke in the distance, I no longer slam on the brakes because I know he is trying to show me the way. If you're staying in a hotel, you usually pick up and read a slip of paper slid under your door, and that's what I did. There was only a single sentence written on the paper: "Don't open the door for anyone tonight." I thought it was a joke. I tore up the paper and threw it into the trash can. About 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. A friendly female voice came from the other side of the door. "Front desk. We just need to verify your documents." I looked through the peephole. A smiling woman dressed in a hotel uniform was standing there. My hand reached for the door handle. At that exact moment, a message arrived on my phone from an unknown number. Look through the peephole again. My name was Noah. This happened in the winter of 2022 in Chicago, Illinois. I had come to the city for a business trip and was staying at an old but well-reviewed hotel near the airport. Room 814, located on the 8th floor at the end of the hallway, had been assigned to me. Since I had been in meetings all day, I didn't return to the room until night. It was around 11:40 p.m. The hallway was completely empty. After the elevator doors closed, a strange silence settled over the entire floor. I entered the room and locked the door. About 10 minutes later, a small piece of white paper slid under the door. There was only one sentence on it: "Don't open the door for anyone tonight." There was no signature, there was no hotel logo either. I assumed it was a prank by some guest and tore up the paper. 20 minutes later came a knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. A woman's voice was heard. "Front desk. There's a small issue with your reservation." I looked through the peephole. Standing there was a woman in her 30s, wearing a hotel uniform. She even had an employee badge around her neck. Everything looked normal. Just as I was about to open the door, my phone buzzed. A message arrived from an unknown number. Look through the peephole again. I pressed my eye against the peephole once more. The woman was no longer smiling. Her head was slowly tilted down, but that wasn't the scariest part. At the edge of the peephole view at the very end of the hallway, inside complete darkness, another person was standing. He too was staring at me. I didn't take my eye off the peephole. The silhouette at the end of the hallway remained motionless. Meanwhile, the woman in the hotel uniform was still standing right outside my door. Suddenly, the woman spoke in a low voice. "Don't look at your phone." I froze. How? Did she know I was looking at my phone right at that moment? Right then, the phone buzzed again. A new message arrived. The person behind the door is not an employee. Cold sweat dripped down my neck. The woman knocked on the door again, harder this time. Knock, knock, knock. "Sir, will only take a minute of your time." I didn't answer. There was complete silence for about 30 seconds. Then the woman said in a very calm voice, "Fine, then I'm coming in." Door handle went down very slowly, once, twice, then a beep came from the card reader, as if someone were using a key card for the room. The door didn't open. Then a second beep was heard. Again, it didn't open. My phone buzzed a third time. Her card isn't working. She's not alone. I looked through the peephole again. The dark silhouette that had been at the end of the hallway was no longer in its previous spot. He had moved closer to my door. I backed away and turned off all the lights in the room. The room was plunged into complete darkness. Only the faint lights of the city were visible through the window. No sound was coming from the other side of the door anymore. This silence was far scarier than the knocking on the door. My phone buzzed again. New message. Don't open the curtains. As soon as I read the message, I instinctively looked at the window. The curtains were closed, however, at their lower section. A shadow cast from outside moved slowly. I was on the 8th floor. It was impossible for anyone to be standing outside the window. Suddenly, the room phone began ringing on its own. Only one word was displayed on the screen, front desk. I picked up the receiver. The same female voice spoke from the other side. "Hello, Mr. Noah. Please open the door." I asked quietly, "Where are you right now?" "I'm right in front of your door." I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. There was no one in front of the door, yet I could clearly hear that woman's breathing on the other end of the phone. Then she said in a very low voice, "So, he's already entered the room." Line cut off immediately. I stood frozen. My phone buzzed one last time. A new message arrived. "Don't look under the bed." As soon as I read the message, my breathing quickened. I had no intention of looking under the bed anyway, yet after that message, my eyes involuntarily turned toward the bed. The room was in total silence. Suddenly, a very faint sound came from under the bed. Tink, as if someone touched the floor with a fingernail. Once, then again, tink, tink. My phone buzzed. New make a sound. Froze where I was standing. A few seconds later, the entrance door to the room creaked open slowly. I had locked the door twice. Yet now, it was as if someone were opening it with extreme caution. From beneath the door, the hallway light spilled into the room. Footsteps were heard, very slow, thud. A few seconds of silence, thud. Someone was walking inside the room. However, nothing could be seen in the dark. The phone screen lit up again. Don't move. I tried to hold my breath completely. The steps approached the bed, then stopped right in front of me. Suddenly, a hand reached out very slowly from under the bed. It was covered in dust. Its fingers were trembling. The hand pushed a small scrap of paper onto the floor. Then it retreated back into the darkness. I looked at the paper. A single sentence was written on it. "The person by the door is not me." Hands trembling, I picked up the paper. The handwriting looked freshly written. The ink wasn't fully dry yet. Suddenly, the person standing near the room entrance spoke in a low voice. "Mr. Noah, I'm sorry for troubling you." This was the exact same woman's voice I had heard in front of the door, except this time the voice was coming from inside the room. I still couldn't see anything. My phone buzzed again. "Don't answer when she speaks." Woman continued, "I just want to help you. There's no danger." At that exact moment, a very soft whisper came from under the bed. "Don't believe her." I stood frozen. There were two different voices in the room, one by the door and one under the bed. A final message arrived on my phone. "Turn on the light." I reached out toward the wall switch. Click. The room lit up instantly. There was no one by the door, and from under the bed, an injured man covered in blood, wearing a hotel security uniform, crawled out. He was struggling to breathe. Grabbing my arm, he whispered, "Run." I couldn't stop them. At that precise moment, dozens of room doors in the hallway opened all at once. The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. It was as if the entire floor had suddenly woken up. The sound of footsteps coming from the hallway kept drawing closer. The security guard tried to stand up with the last of his strength. Grabbing my arm, he pointed to a small door that led to the service exit. "The stairs. Don't take the elevator." We ran out of the room. Dozens of people were already standing in the hallway. All of them were in hotel staff uniforms. Front desk clerk, housekeeping staff, security guards. Yet none of them were speaking. They were simply staring at us. The injured guard pushed me into the stairwell. He shut the door behind us. As it closed, I looked at him one last time. He nodded at me, signaling to go. Then the door shut. Only a single scream was heard from behind it. I ran down the stairs to the lower floor without stopping. When I reached the lobby, a completely different shift was working at the front desk. Out of breath, I told them what had happened. The manager immediately pulled up the security camera feeds. They rewound the footage of room 814 in the video. I was entering the room. A few minutes later, a piece of paper was slid under the door. Then came the knock on the door. However, no one was visible in front of the door on the camera. Then came the terrifying part. In the video, I appeared to be speaking with someone inside the room. Then I backed away on my own, turned off the lights, and stood motionless in the darkness for a long time. However, the camera didn't show the interior of the room, so no one could see what I had seen. I told the manager about the injured security guard. He opened the old employee directory on his computer. He showed me a photo. My heart stopped. The man in the picture was the exact same security guard who had crawled out from under the bed. The manager said in a quiet voice, "This man's name was Daniel Harper, 2014. He mysteriously vanished in room 814. I never saw that hotel again. 2 years later, I had to travel to Chicago again for work. This time, I stayed at a different hotel. When I entered the room at night, I saw a small white paper on the floor. Only a single sentence was written on it. You chose the right room number this time." And underneath it, for the first time, was a signature, Daniel. People say that the greatest danger in Death Valley is the heat. They are wrong. I went there with my friends to set up camp. There were 3 of us. The first night, everything was normal. The second night, however, someone whispered my name from outside our tent. "Daniel." I thought my friends were calling me. Just as I was about to unzip the tent, a message arrived on my phone. The sender was me. There was only a single sentence written: "Don't leave the tent." I immediately looked toward my friend's tent. Their tent was empty. My name was Daniel. This happened in October 2021 in Death Valley National Park, California. My 2 close friends, Mason and Tyler, and I had gone to the desert to spend the weekend away from the city. We were experienced campers. We had brought a satellite phone, extra water, GPS, and backup fuel. Everything seemed well planned. The first night passed quietly. The sky was completely clear. The stars were brighter than they would ever appear in the city. In the morning, we went for a hike and returned to the campsite in the evening. On the second night, it was around 02:11 a.m. A voice whispering my name woke me up. "Daniel." The voice sounded very close, as if someone were standing right next to the tent. I thought it was Mason. Just as I was about to open the zipper, my phone lit up. In the sender field, Daniel was written. It was my own number. The message was short: "Leave the tent." I immediately looked at my friend's tent. In the faint beam of my flashlight, I saw that the zipper was open. The inside was empty. At least they went to the restroom. I tried to reassure myself. Right at that moment, the voice came again, this time even closer: "Daniel." But now I understood that the voice wasn't coming from outside the entrance of the tent. It was coming from the back side. I held my breath. There was no entrance at the back of the tent. There was only thick fabric and the open desert behind it. The voice came again, very softly this time. "Daniel." My phone buzzed. A new message. The sender was me again. "Answer the voice." As I looked at the screen, the fabric of the tent pressed inward very lightly, as if someone had touched it with their palm from the outside. Once, then a second time, the fabric returned to its original shape. I turned on my flashlight. The light fell onto the tent wall. No human shadow was visible on the side, however. At the bottom section of the fabric, the shadows of 2 slowly moving feet could be made out, as if someone were circling around the tent. My phone buzzed again. "Look through the window." Right at that moment, a shadow passed in front of the tent's small transparent window very quickly. I involuntarily looked. Nothing was visible. A few seconds later, Mason's voice came from a distance. "Daniel, here." The voice sounded exactly like my friend's. Then Tyler shouted as well, "Hurry!" I approached the zipper. The phone buzzed one last time. This time the message consisted of only 3 words. "They are not Mason." My hand froze on the zipper. The voices coming from outside sounded exactly like my friend's. "Daniel, hurry up. We're here." I could even hear Mason's laugh, yet the message on my phone wouldn't leave my mind. "They are not Mason." I didn't answer. A few seconds later, complete silence fell outside. Then slow footsteps were heard around the tent. Crunch, crunch, crunch. As if someone were walking in circles on the sand. My phone buzzed again. New message. "They are waiting for you to answer." Suddenly, my satellite phone began ringing on its own. This was impossible. There was no cellular network in this area. Only one word was displayed on the screen. Mason, and I answered the call. Very faint breathing sounds came from the other end. Then Mason whispered, "Daniel, I'm in the cave. They took Tyler." The line cut off abruptly, right at that moment. The same voice of Mason shouted from outside the tent, "Daniel, I'm here." 2 different Masons, one inside the phone, one outside. A final message arrived on my phone. "The one speaking on the phone is real." I stood frozen with the satellite phone in my hand. The voice of Mason coming from outside was growing more persistent. "Daniel, open the tent." However, the Mason on the phone whispered in a very weak voice, "Listen, if you leave the tent, they will take your voice too." "What does that mean?" I saw them. "They learn your voice first. Then, they speak like you." Line abruptly cut off. Right at that moment, the voice outside changed. It was no longer just Mason speaking. Tyler was calling out too. Then, my own voice was heard. "Daniel, it's me, come out." Hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. My phone buzzed again. "Turn off the light." I immediately turned off the flashlight. The inside of the tent was plunged into darkness. A few seconds later, 3 shadows appeared behind the thin fabric of the tent. They stood completely motionless. Then, a 4th shadow appeared. This shadow was different from the others. It was very tall. Its head was bent unnaturally to the side. It slowly began circling around the tent. Meanwhile, the other 3 shadows didn't move from their spot. A final message arrived on my phone. "If the 4th shadow stops, run." I gripped the phone tightly. The 4th shadow visible on the tent wall continued to slowly make its rounds. 1 circle, then a second. Every time it reached the entrance of the tent, it stopped for a few seconds, then it moved again. Meanwhile, the other 3 shadows weren't moving. It was as if they were waiting for something. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. New message. "Ready." I threw my backpack over my shoulder. I grabbed the car keys. My heart was beating so fast that I could hear my own breath. Then, the 4th shadow stopped moving. Right at the entrance, the phone screen lit up. The last message. Unzipped the tent and ran outside with all my strength. In the dark desert, the car was only 30 meters away. As I ran, I looked to the right for a split second. 3 people were standing next to Mason's tent. All of them were Mason, the same face, the same clothes, the same look. All of them turned toward me at the exact same time. Meanwhile, the tall figure behind them remained motionless. I couldn't make out its face, but its eyes gleamed in the faint light of the headlights. I reached the car and started the engine. As I closed the rear door, the phone buzzed one last time. There was no text this time. The GPS simply opened on its own. Only one direction was shown on the map, and a single sentence was written at the bottom of the screen. "They are still in the back seat." Reading those words, I didn't dare to look in the rearview mirror. I drove the car away from the campsite at high speed. Behind, only dust rose in the light of my headlights. About 10 minutes later, I reached the park ranger station. The staff there helped me immediately. I told them everything. As soon as morning broke, we returned to the campsite together with park rangers and a search team. The tents were in place. The tracks of the car tires were visible too, but there was no trace of Mason and Tyler. Their bags, phones, and all their belongings remained in the tent. The search lasted for 3 days. Official result: missing persons not found. As for me, I didn't tell anyone about one detail. When the car was brought to the park headquarters, the back seat was covered in sand, even though no one had gotten in there. On top of the sand were 4 handprints. 2 resembled human hands, while the other 2 were unusually long. A few months later, a small package arrived in my mail. No sender was listed. Inside was only a single satellite phone. Only one audio recording was saved in the phone's memory. Its date belonged to 2 days after Mason and Tyler went missing. I opened the audio recording. At first, the sound of strong wind came through, then Mason spoke. "Daniel, if you're hearing this, we're still here." From behind Tyler, "Look at them." Then both of their voices cut off suddenly. There was complete silence for a few seconds. Following that, my own voice was heard, very calm, very clear. "Now all 3 of us are here." Audio recording ended. I never returned to Death Valley after that day. Yet every year in October, the same coordinates arrive on my phone from an unknown number. The coordinates always point to that campsite. And every time, only a single sentence is written at the end of the message. The 4th spot is still empty.